In this week's class, we started talking about individual behavior in organization. A lot of what managers do and spend their time doing is working with individuals, with subordinates. We're very interested in the motivation of individuals. We talked a bit about what does motivation mean, and for in most modern organizations, it means much more than just how hard people work. We're very concerned with how smart they work, what kind of innovative contributions they make to the company, ways that they improve our processes, service delivery. The motivation is itself a complex description of behavior. We're interested in motivated behavior because we both think and know through experience that people's level of motivation is absolutely critical to making the most of their abilities on the job and their contributions to the firm and to our organization. We started talking about initially just coming out of scientific management, the notion of exercising control in organizations. With the existence of the division of labor in particular, we have a great need to coordinate activities, and this means control activities, both in terms of the duties we assign people to, the people we select to be part of the organization. And then a component of this is their motivated work behavior. We began talking about the need satisfaction model, and we covered it to understand it because it's so widely distributed. And it is a model that talks about this notion that people are satisfied with their work, that they will be more productive. The Star article does a very good job of really putting a nail in that coffin. It doesn't turn out to be true in practice or from a scientific basis, but it's very widely disseminated. It's extremely important to understand it because so many of the people we interact with think of that as leadership. And we said, there's nothing per se evil or bad about the model. It's just not very useful. And so it's useful to know about it. I constantly run into people when I tell them that I'm teaching leadership. They will ask me about Maslow's needs hierarchy and do we use Maslow's needs hierarchy. And so it's an important thing to understand. It is really very much a do no harm kind of thing to teach to people. It's very widely used in supervisor training. And if you really kind of boil down to what the need satisfaction model teaches people, it says, listen to them, understand their individuality, that they're human beings, and be nice to them. And that's never bad advice. But it's not very useful for us as leaders, and we really want to think about our leverage and opportunities to really increase performance levels and also to engage more complicated behaviors than just working hard. We really want to engage people's minds, we want to engage their heart, and we're interested in models that give us more insight into how we might do that. The model we first started with is called the reinforcement model, and the reinforcement model is very fundamental to how we think about human behavior. We are used to and constantly talk about behavior being rewarded or punished. And we know, and from infancy we know, and as small children we know, right, we experience the world of rewards and punishments, and that influences our behavior. We are interested in that candy snack. We do want to avoid whatever punishments that our parents might met out to us, and so we've kind of grown up with that. In the workplace, certainly the reason people go to work is because of the pay that they get. It's something that is important for them, and so it's a really fundamental part of human behavior. It's a very reasonable place for us to start. In talking about what makes reinforcement work, and we are using the term consequences because we really want to describe and talk about different kinds of reinforcement. So not just rewards and punishments, but but negative reinforcement, extinction is a type of consequence we talked about. And we said that in order for consequences to impact behavior, it must be contingent. And people must recognize the consequence is associated with the behavior. It's a pretty simple idea, but in fact, it's a pretty important idea because we see administratively in organizations, actually one of the challenges we have with formal systems is the contingent rewardative behavior. On the informal side, and as a leadership tool, we have an opportunity to be very contingent. And some of the power of the informal tools available to us, recognition, acknowledgement, praise, is the fact that they can be delivered in a very contingent fashion, and people appreciate them. The other thing we said is that people's response to different consequences is idiosyncratic. It just means it varies by individual, and people have different things that they like. And so we can't assume that all consequences are going to be experienced exactly the same way by everyone. And again, this is, as we talked about, it's one of the big challenges of administrative systems. We have very few consequences available to us in our small awards system in particular, and people may not value them. And if they don't value them, it's not going to impact their behavior. It's also important, we said, there's some kind of basic, and it's very much definitional but important, is that the impact of consequences depends how they're scheduled. Kind of the timing, it is the timing and frequency with which they're delivered. And the kind of approaches that are that are variable, that are kind of a randomness and less predictable, actually lead to more robust behavior, less inclined to satiation, less inclined to extinction. If you want to think about what's the kind of ideal variable, persistent behavior kind of reinforcement schedule, it's a slot machine. That is a variable ratio. You never know when you're going to get a payoff. People have a sense that next time that they feed the money in, they're going to get the big win. And so they're not only varying the frequency, but also the size of the payout. And it motivates people to be very persistent in that task. Go to any gambling venue and just look at how many people are there just slaving away for hours at a machine, and you can see why people get real interested in those kind of payout systems. Shaping refers to the process we go through to establish new behaviors. And so we are trying to move people along. And part of it is sometimes new behaviors are too big of a leap. And so we really start with almost behaviors. We try to use continuous schedules to bring people along. And then as the behavior gets established, we indulge in what's called stretching. We change out the time period, the ratio. We make rewards less frequent. We might go from also very predictable to a variable, and and it's just something that actually we're pretty adept at doing. We kind of know this implicitly, and we said that this notion of stretching, for instance, and all of these notions of how consequences are given are actually in some ways good news, because one of the things we really have problems with because of the time demands on us when we're in a management role, we're trying to be an effective leader, is it's extremely hard to do this in a really purposeful fashion. We always want to be contingent. We always want to make sure we're rewarding the behavior that we want to promote. But the good news in all of this is the kind of randomness at which we do it, as long as we're contingent, as long as we're understanding idiosyncratic, the randomness is actually a good thing. We don't devalue our currency of praise. We don't devalue our recognition. We're not able to do it every single time on the behavior, but that we notice the behavior is highly, highly impactful. The other thing we said that's very important about the reinforcement model is not only as a kind of a how-to model, is as an analytic tool, it's extremely useful for us. And we're interested in that analytic tool because what it says is, as any good behavioral theory, it says that if you want to understand what's going on in a situation, look at the pattern of behavior, assume it's sensible, and look at the pattern of reinforcements and punishments associated with that behavior. And we may well arrive at a conclusion that the employees are lazy or goofing off. That's always possible. But at least we've kind of understood from the very beginning, we've listened closely to what the behaviors are telling us. And we saw, for instance, in the Real Good Insurance case, it does us really no good to assume things about a pretty big group of employees who are probably very diverse in kind of attitude, outlook, and prior experience. And we really need to look at what have we done? What is the system we've designed? What is it that the management feedback that people are getting? What are the bonus system, the way that people get acknowledgement? How is that shaping the pattern of behavior? We may well find out that it's got a whole lot more to do with the system or with our kind of consequences than it does with any particular attitudes that they might have. We're going to be interested in attitudes. They're certainly a very important part of people's behavior and predictors of behavior. But reinforcement is a great place to start. I always want to start with any analysis. What's the behavior? What are the consequences associated with that behavior? It's a good baseline on which to build. It's a simple explanation. We wish the world were so simple that all we had to worry about were consequences. Not true, but it's what keeps managers in business. So that there's other things going on that we need to understand that are more complicated demands more out of us as leaders other than just worrying about the acknowledgement we give people. On the further reading, this book was a huge bestseller, The 1 Minute Manager, and it's basically a book of tips on how to effectively reward and acknowledge people. And so it's got a lot of great kind of little tips, nothing earth-shattering, but really getting you to think about, and the title of it says it all. How can you, in 1 minute a day, do a much better job of leading? And it is so much about the stuff you read about in Kuznets Poser, acknowledging people, knowing enough about them to make a meaningful acknowledgement, knowing enough about them to know they're going to be responsive to that kind of idiosyncratic idea is all embedded. And then the other thing I have here is this book by Ben Hamper. We read in class an excerpt from a column that he had written, but he has a book that's a collection of his columns that is at times incredibly funny. It is also, it just makes you wonder an awful lot about management in very large organizations. You can kind of see in this very large structure, he works for General Motors, the vast gulf that exists between the production employees and management and the leadership of the firm. And there are points of it that are sad. It's really kind of it's just saddening to see how much these people are unappreciated, but it's also in some ways frightening to see what happens in their workplace. They engage in practices called doubling up, where somebody takes a nap, somebody does two jobs. You can just see the quality kind of issues proliferating around this whole plant. And it's an important thing to look at, again, I found it a funny, enjoyable read, but also an interesting commentary and it's not just American management. These are global kinds of problems that exist all over the place. Some management cultures have done better at it than others. The American management has improved vastly in terms of kind of understanding the issues that are taking place in organization. But still, a lot of this stuff is going on, and I think it's just good to get that perspective of a first-line employee and how they see the work, how they see the management, and how they see their firm. And so next week we'll take up cognitive models, which are a core to how we're going to talk about everything in the course. And they build off of reinforcement. Reinforcement still remains, consequences remain important, they're analytically important, they're an important way to understand how the world works. And we're going to keep that, but we're going to add in some complexity, and we're going to start talking about beliefs, attitudes, how people make judgments about motive are as extremely important part of the cognitive models of work behavior.